Hey, today I'll be talking about what does it feel like to truly surrender to God? What changes? I'll be going over the changes that happen externally in our life around us, and then I'll also be going over the changes that happen within us, like in our heart and in our mind. I know a lot of us as Christians want to surrender to God, but we just don't know how. And sometimes we need to understand what it feels like to surrender to God, to really just do it. I'm actually going to be going over the changes that happen in our heart and in our mind first. When I think about every time that I have surrendered a situation to God, whether that was my finances, my future husband, honestly anything, I immediately felt a sense of relief. Like immediately you just feel like a burden has been lifted off of you. It's like you don't have the responsibility anymore to care about that thing yourself. Instead, you can focus on obeying God. So you have this kind of shift within you. You go from, I want to be in control of this situation, I want this part of my life to be this way, and this way, to suddenly being like, God, I'm going to do it your way, I'm going to do it in your time. And it's just relieving. It feels so relieving. Like you just don't have that responsibility anymore. You no longer have to take control over things because you have given all the control to God. I also know that it can be hard to surrender everything to God at once. Often when we go to surrender to God, we're like, God, take my life, take everything. But I don't feel like that's super productive because it doesn't get us to intentionally sit down and surrender all the different areas of our life. We might still be holding on to things after we do this. So I highly suggest surrendering everything in your life to God separately. For example, I think a lot of Christians, they're trying to surrender to God financially. They're trying to say, I want to do my purpose, but I also want to serve God, but I also want to make money. And they're just trying right now. But I will say, as someone who's been through it, who's been through a period of financial distress and gone to being provided for, that you can't do those two things at the same time. You can't fully seek Jesus and surrender to him and care about your finances. Like, you can't be seeking both. You have to just be seeking Jesus. We cannot seek both provision and Jesus at the same time. But this is also a great way we can surrender everything to God. Just remember, money is not required to follow God. He promises to provide for us, that all things will come to us after we seek his kingdom, but that doesn't include seeking provision. It's just seeking his kingdom. So I kind of wanted to touch on this today because I know a lot of Christians are looking for both Jesus and finances at the same time, but the way that you get provided for by God is if you just seek Jesus and you just follow him. And maybe that includes going through a time of financial hardship for a season or two, but then you learn what you need to learn. You learn to rely on God alone. Your faith blooms. Everything just gets so much better. So that's kind of just one way you can surrender to God. And as you surrender to God, as you surrender each and every area to God to take control of, you will learn so much wisdom. And that's honestly another sign you've surrendered to God, is that you've become so wise, or you keep becoming more wise and more spiritually mature as the days go on. Everything in the Bible starts to make perfect sense to you. You'll start reading a passage that maybe wasn't super clear before. And honestly, everything just starts clicking because you're living out the Bible in your everyday life every single day. So the Bible just becomes more deep for you, more enriching. And honestly, if you're surrendering to God, you will see so much spiritual growth every single moment. The biggest thing that I think happens though is that we stop worrying, right? The Bible says, do not fear, do not worry. It says it continuously, and just every so often it just says it. And that's one of the biggest things. We stop worrying. When we've given God control over our finances, over our dating life, over every single area in our life, we stop worrying about those things. And the only thing we focus on is obeying God. For me, I rarely worry now, and I know when I start worrying that it's time to trust God with something, or I just have to seek what I have to do next to be obedient to Him. If we're worrying, we're probably not obeying God. And if we're worrying, we haven't given God that control. So a sign that you have fully surrendered to God means you have fully stopped worrying in that area of your life. And now I wanted to talk about the things that happen externally. We'll actually start seeing better relationships in our life. For example, when I surrendered to God, I also surrendered friendships. Like, God, I want you to pick out the friendships that are best for me. I want you to take away who is not good and bring to me who is good. And for a while, I was kind of lonely. Like, I didn't have the same friends I used to have, or it just wasn't, I couldn't keep up with maintaining those friendships. Like, I could not keep up with them. It was too exhausting. It was draining. I immediately knew and saw why God had removed these people from my life. But very, very recently, I've started having more and more people being placed into my life in different ways, in just everyday ways, through work, through church. And honestly, it is so wonderful actually building friendships that I know are with good people and good people for me. Something that you should do while you're surrendering to God is ask God to put His desires in you. Say, God, let my desires match yours. And I honestly think this is the easiest way we can learn to obey God, because it is just, if we start desiring something after we're praying or in the middle of prayer and it is godly, it aligns with the Bible, then we know it's God and we know what our next step is. And I just think that is such a cool and practical way to surrender to God and make sure you're obeying Him. Oftentimes, though, surrendering to God looks like going through a season of hardship or spiritual warfare. We naturally don't want to go through these hard seasons, and a lot of people pull away from God during this time. These are the people who are seeds sown on the rocky or thorny path, where the worries of life choke them and they just fall away from God. They fall away from being obedient. God wants you to be at peace. He wants you to feel joyful and wonderful, and He wants you to reach that point in your spiritual journey where you're comfortable with Him and you keep seeking Him endlessly. But almost always we have to go through a time of testing. Hebrews 12 says we will be punished by God, but it is those who are accepted as His children who go through these seasons of punishment. And that's just how the Bible words it. I don't really think it's God punishing us. I really think it's just Him refining us and getting us prepared for what's next. This has been super hard for me, but if you start going through periods of hardship, there's no reason to worry. There's no reason to stress. Just know that you have to do it to be obedient to God, and really pay attention to how He's refining you in the moment. What is God teaching you because you're going through this hardship? What is He teaching you through your emotions? What is He teaching you about spiritual warfare? Maybe you feel like people are just ganging up on you. Nothing in life is going your way. What about that can you learn from that? Like, for a long time, I've been in this fight or flight mode, right? Where I haven't been feeling a lot of joy, where the joy I have for Jesus is often overrun by feelings of brokenness, hopelessness, feeling stuck. I'm ultra rapid cycling, so I'm going up and down through the bipolar cycles multiple times in a day, and it's just been exhausting. Like, I feel like I can't rest, and I feel like I said, I'm constantly in this fight or flight mode. And when you're in that fighting mode, when you're in spiritual warfare battle mode in your life, it's hard to find joy. It's hard. But recently, God's been speaking that over me. Hey, I want you to feel happy again. Like, you've forgotten how to feel happy because you've been fighting for so long, but I want you to start feeling it again. I want you, when those moments arise, when those things that bring you joy happen in your life, allow yourself to feel that joy completely. Because honestly, guys, I have forgotten to feel joy, and I don't want to say that's an abnormal thing for Christians, because I still felt some level of joy just from being saved, for being in love with Jesus and all of that. But my emotions and my fighting, my spiritual warfare battling, all my armor of God stuff, like, that happened. All of that made me emotionally very just on edge, couldn't rest, couldn't find peace, and I couldn't find joy. It overran my natural feeling of joy that I experience with Jesus in my relationship with Him. And that happens sometimes as Christians. Sometimes there is a lot of warfare we need to fight. Sometimes there is just a bigger battle going on and we are in fight mode. We are ready to battle, ready to be prayer warriors, ready to obey God at every moment's notice. If we go through periods of hardship and seasons of struggle, God always wants to bring us out of those seasons. He always wants to restore the joy and the peace that the enemy may have stolen from us during that time, or maybe just the act of constantly having to fight a battle that's been imposed on you. Like for me, it's my mental illness. For me, it's just a lot of other external things going on. I didn't sleep for 8 months, and I feel like that's when all of this started, is when I was fighting to stay awake during the day, fighting to just live my life. And I've been in fight or flight mode for 2 years. 2 years, and it's just drained me of my joy. But like I said, God's gonna bring it back. He always will. This is just a little bit about surrendering to God. I hope everything I share today makes sense to you. I pray it prepares you for what's next, and I also pray it helps you identify the areas in your life that maybe you haven't surrendered to God yet. I know I have those moments where I have to re-surrender to God a lot because I'm like, oops, I started worrying about this again, or I started putting this in my own control again. So focus on giving that control to God. Your responsibility is to obey Him and not to take control of any area of your life. Let God completely transform you and your life. You do that by surrendering to Him. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. I make videos on mental health and Christian living, Christian lifestyle. And if this video meant something to you, please leave a comment as well. Have a great day.